more than welcome. But so Thomas Wang, the partner of UC&CS to present in the annual meeting the customer service for the region of the South Cone, which is a little bit above the continent. Marant Caballero, he works as a service director for customer in Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Brazil, and now he's visiting us. So he's going to build relationships with us to take care of this market. So the topic that we proposed is how to make business in China and Hong Kong. So I will give the floor to Marant. Thank you very much. Good afternoon or good evening. How are you doing? It was a long day, right? Well, please, if you need a coffee, please stand up and get it. Well, since this presentation is in English, but most of you speak Spanish, I would like to ask you, how do you want me to give it, in Spanish or English? Spanish, okay. So first and foremost, I would like to thank UC&CS for the opportunity on behalf of Thomas Wong who allowed us to participate with new members in this annual meeting. So I want to tell you two things. First and foremost, the people have asked me if I'm Chinese. As Mauricio said, I'm not, I'm Mexican. And the other question is that I'm not going to touch on topics. The presentation is the process of how to make business in China and Hong Kong. I'm not going to talk about imports and exports. So this is my disclaimer. So first, to begin with my presentation, I'm going to talk about Hong Kong. Hong Kong has a legal and fiscal system different to continental China because it is a former British colony. It maintains some things about the colony, the common law, the English language, and a fiscal system compared to the fiscal continental China. For example, we have three options. The first one is our representative office, which is like is the first steps to enter a market, and it is important to mention doesn't allow the generation of profits. It's strictly forbidden. And also the responsibility are extended to the parent company, and it's important to say that it's the kind of registration. This option, it is less and less used because of the next option, the private limited company, that offers a wide margin of commercial activities. The responsibility are limited by the shares and also the short time for registration. You can establish a company in 7 working days in Hong Kong. The other option is the branch office, which can develop the same business activities as the parent company, and the responsibilities are extended to parent company. But according to the complexity of the parent company, the time that it will take to open it or establish it. So I'm going to talk about the most common option with this private limited company and the elements. It should have a company name in English or in Cantonese, which is the traditional Chinese, as I said, because of the British heritage. And this name doesn't have to be in the use of the registration of companies. The other elements at least to have one director, one shareholder. It doesn't matter that the director and shareholder do not reside in Hong Kong, but the director has to be a natural individual. The shareholder can be a natural, an individual or entity. There's no limit to register a company. you can establish it with $1 Hong Kong. It's one of the attractives it has. It also, we have the figure of company secretary that needs to be a corporate resident and an individual or a entity, and the corporate secretary can provide the registered address in Hong Kong. However, this doesn't mean that you will have a physical office in Hong Kong in order to have the company. This is another attractive. Let's talk about the simple tax regime. All the profits that come from a company in Hong Kong are taxable at 16.5%, which is a very attractive percentage. For property tax, the owners of land have to pay 15% of the total value of the company. The people that work in Hong Kong have to pay 15% or less, depending on the salary, and the gain, the capital gain of capital and assets are not taxable. It's 0%. It is important to say that as of next year, it will be a new reform where there will be a two-level system for profits. The first 2 million of gains of Hong Kong dollars will be under a rate of 8.25%, a reduction of 50% of the standard tax, and this is an incentive of the government for SMEs. If a company generates more than 2 million, as of then, the previous rate will be taken into account.
So how do you see this? Interesting, right? Another attractive of Hong Kong is that dividend payment in a Hong Kong company are not taxable. There's no VAT or IVA in Hong Kong. That's why it is attractive for shopping. Now, talking about royalties. The total value of royalties, as you can see, it's 4.95%. They have highly competitive rates in Hong Kong. Now, responsibilities of Hong Kong companies for yearly responsibilities, year return, and the renewal of the trade license. These documents prove the company is still active, and they have to be submitted after 42 days of the inauguration of the company. Then returns and financial statements have to be audited by a Hong Kong certified auditor. Tax calculation should be based on these statements. Now, compensation to employees and directors. Statements. Now, let's talk about China. As you can see, Hong Kong is simple and direct, and this is more complicated and interesting. Before entering China, we recommend you to make a feasibility survey for investment. In China, not all investments are open to foreign investors, not all industries. There's something called the Catalog of Foreign Investment, which is being updated. Every year policies are updated. They add, they change, and they put the ones that work the best in some regions. So there are 7 special trade zones where this concept is applied, which is a little bit new. The negative list allows foreigners not to invest in those industries that are traditionally not open to investment. So in free trade zones, they have this phrase, walking on the river, touching the stones. Now, let's see the most common corporations in China. Again, representation office. Like in Hong Kong, cannot have activities for profits. This is just market research, etc. And then we have the wholly foreign-owned enterprises. That could be something interesting. It is also important to say that in China, at least in this kind of companies, hiring employees is limited and registration timing is longer. Depending on the structure, it could take from 1 to 2 months. The next option is the WUFI, which is a wholly foreign-owned company. As I said, business activities are restricted, so you have to be very specific in defining the scope of the company. If it is a limited liability company, it doesn't need a minimum registered capital. However, 1 or 2 years should be taken into consideration for the operation of the company because losses are expected. As its name says, it doesn't require a Chinese partner, and registration time could take from 2 to 3 months, depending on the zone, the province, etc. And then we have the joint venture, which is the most popular. You have access to other industries that are also restricted, but here you need a Chinese partner. They will agree upon the shares of each partner. This company has a more complex registration because you have a Chinese partner. These kind of projects are not usually allowed to foreigners. That's why the time is longer reviewing the agreements and the steps are more complex. And now we have the incorporation process. The elements of a WUFI, I will take this as an example because it is also the most popular investment for foreigners. You have several options. We need to have a holding company, could be a Hong Kong company or simply individuals or shareholders of the WUFI, depending on the size of the project. It is made up by a board of directors. For small companies could be one, and some shareholders. It has to be an odd number, not even. And then appoint the legal representative. That could be also the chairman of the board, and then the general manager. These figures are not limited to Chinese individuals. And then a supervisor to monitor the other figures who cannot be the general manager or the chairman of the board or part of the board of directors. This is the incorporation process of a company in China. It is more complicated, more steps, and takes longer. Very briefly, I will just describe this. If you have additional questions, I can later answer them. What are the elements of a company? Well, it has to have a Chinese number because in continental China, the official language is Mandarin Chinese, simplified Chinese. Some documents have to be notarized before a notary public, and then in the country you have the articles of incorporation, legal structure, and you need to prepare this, and this could take a month. It is a more complicated process. Once you have this information, it is submitted to authorities. Online procedures are available. Practices are changing, and many online platforms have been enabled for this process. And then you need to open your bank account and then apply different certificates according to the business model. Responsibilities. In continental China, you have monthly and yearly responsibilities. Monthly returns, and also for employees in China, you need to have a physical office for the recorded or registered address and have employees. Now, annual compliance. We have tax reconciliation audits, which are not mandatory, but they are advisable to avoid any random supervision or audit from the government. We also have trade license renewal, proof of operation, and once a year we have the individual income return. Now talking about taxes. In continental China, we have a standard rate which is 25% on income tax, but in free trade zones there are incentives, especially in those industries that are incentivated. Technology, green technologies. In China, we have VAT. The standard rate is 16%. Depending on the service, you could also have a different rate. Then, individual income tax. Depending on your income level, the more taxes you pay. Then we have also dividend taxes, interest, and royalties. We need to analyze this, which is the relationship of your country and China, because double taxation agreements are in place and you can determine the rate of these taxes. This is the standard rate. But in the case of Mexico, we can have access to 5% because we have double taxation agreements with China. And this is all on my presentation. Thank you for your time and thank you for this space. Thank you. Marant, we are in UC&CS, very pleased to have a so well-educated young person receive this as a recognition for your participation. Thank you very much.